What's happening, everybody? This is Jim from JCRC back again. This is Saturday, August 19th, and continuing on with the second round of the build series. I worked last night pretty late, recorded a bunch of videos. Yesterday was a very late day. I was up for a long time, probably close to 24 hours. Don't know how I did it, but I guess with the help of Amp Energy Drink is how I did it. So here we go again. I'm going to continue on with these front half shafts, spindles, kingpins, bearings, that whole assembly. I did pull apart some, or check on my body work and body panels that I was working on. Some of them are out of paint. Roof panel here, you can see very slightly some different colorations there in that metal flake. It didn't quite turn out how I wanted it to, or it's not exactly the look that I was going for. I was kind of hoping it would be a little bit more of a flip-flop paint job, but not so much. So that was that Clear Effects paint from Duplicolor that I put in first, and then I used, what is it, Plastidip spray paint. First time I ever used it. Probably will not use it again. It kind of left a lot of overspray. It was hard to trim off. Even though this had plastic to peel off of it, it was still a pain in the butt. I went over top of that Plastidip with white paint just because the Plastidip was really textured, and I was kind of worried about it peeling off because it is a removable paint. So I put on white over top of it, and I put clear coat over top of that. Probably like 2 coats of white, maybe 3 coats of white, another 3 coats of clear coat. And that was just to try to help seal that Plastidip so it wasn't going to be more apt for peeling off. I was trying to make it less prone to peeling is the moral of the story there. So there's one body panel from that. I have a few more body panels sitting here. The bumper, you might be able to see a little bit more flake on the bumper. I can see it on that lower portion down there. Number plates, of course, which were, these body panels, obviously when they're sitting on the car, you're not going to see that white underneath it so much. The number plates, if I would have had black paint, I probably would have spray painted the back half of it black. Like I said, I could have left it blue, but that blue really kind of looked like crap. You might be able to see a little bit of it in between here on that line. I try to use an X-Acto knife and just kind of scraped all that off around the edge just to make that not so visible. But it has white on the back, so I guess we're just gonna have to leave it like that. Here are the side panels. They turned out not too shabby, I guess. Once again, white on the back edge on both of those. I know we're supposed to be talking about body or drivetrain parts and not body panels. Here's the driver's helmet that started out all white. I'm not too good at painting with a brush. I'm really good with a spray can, not so good with a brush. I did paint this with Testors paint markers. So for using paint markers, really, I don't think I did all that bad of a job. I mean, you can still see some little fine mess-ups along the edge here. Maybe got to have a little bit of white showing around the top of the visor there. But really not too bad for using paint markers, and then I put clear coat over top of it. I put like 3 or 4 coats of clear coat over top of this just to try to help seal it and make the paint marker a little bit less apparent. You can see the lines before I put the clear coat in it with the paint marker. After clear coating it, it just kind of put a shiny cap on it, I guess. And then, like I said before, I was thinking about stealing the driver out of here, of the WL Toys, with that whole cockpit assembly. I ended up painting this one. Once again, use paint markers. So from far away it looks pretty good. Up close it starts looking kind of rough. Gold on the steering wheel, white gloves on the driver, silver steering wheel. Probably could have painted this part black, but I figured it was too much black, not enough difference in contrast there between the two colors. And I even put my name in there. Yes, it's kind of kind of rough. Looks pretty bad. Once again, using paint markers, but first time attempting that, so we'll see how that turns out and how it looks when it's all together. Anywho, back to the job at hand. We will start assembling all this good stuff. And you know, before we start assembling this, since I was just talking about paint and I was talking about how that blue didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted, I was hoping it was going to be more of a flip-flop paint job. This is for the newer viewers. I'll show you what my trail finder looks like. I used that same color, the Duplicolor Clear Effects, on my trail finder, which was a flat gray to start off with, and it was a hard plastic body, so I'm painting on top of that body. I used that metal flake and painted on top of the body of the trail finder, and then put clear coat over top of that. And you can see how that turned out, which really shows the different metal flakes in it. It's obviously all scratched to hell, but excuse my French there, or for swearing, but it's definitely scratched up. But that was two reasons that I used that color and used that paint, was because it was you know, factory primer gray or whatever underneath this body, flat gray. And I figured if I just shot it with the, you know, that Duplicolor Clear Effects, the metal flake, it was going to be less likely to show scratches from rollovers and things of that nature. And it definitely has done its job. I mean, from far away, the scratches are less apparent. And when you get really close up on it, or when the sun's shining on it, you can see all the different colors that are in it. But from far away, it just looks, you know, like a flat gray or almost like a vanilla color. But regardless, that's kind of how I was thinking that this other body was going to turn out. I figured it would be, you know, blue, but with this kind of coloring in the background, not so much. It just basically turned it into a blue metal flake. So I might have been, in the end, I would have been better off just using a blue metal flake on it and just going with that. If I would have put black behind the Lexan on the Twin Hammers body, if I would have used black for a backer on it, then it would have turned into like a purple, green, blue flip-flop paint job. So if you looked at it one way, it would be like a purple, greenish color. Look at it the other way, and it would probably be like a bluish, you know, a blue-black color or whatever, or a different color. So regardless, live and learn. So back to the build at hand. And boy, oh boy, I am all over the map, aren't I? This is the paint that I used on the backer for the Twin Hammers. Plastidip Blaze, flat blue. I wanted a flat color. You're supposed to use flat colors when you're backing that Clear Effects paint. And the place where I bought this paint, which is my local auto store, this was pretty much the only flat blue that they had. So that was the only reason that I used it, was because it was a flat color. It was a blue that I wanted. Unfortunately, it just didn't come out the way that I wanted it. I will not be using this stuff again. I don't like the way it sprays. You have to use a lot of pressure with your finger on the nozzle. It just, when you're going back and forth with your side-to-side sweeps, it really affects that, because you have to put so much pressure on it, and it doesn't spray as far. So normally when you're holding, you know, the can, you know, 6 to 10 inches or 10 to whatever inches away from the part that you're spraying, this one you have to get a lot closer, just because it doesn't have as much propulsion, or it doesn't have enough, you know, juice coming out of the can. That the paint's like a little bit thicker, so you have to get a little bit closer when you're using it. Nevertheless, I definitely will not be using this again. Like I said, I usually stick to Duplicolor. It's worked out great for all the years that I've been painting these RC cars. And once again, I've been messing around with RC cars since 1979, 1980. You know, and since the early 80s, I guess, is when I started using Duplicolor, and it's always worked out good for me. So once again, live and learn. Plastidip paint. I will definitely not be using this again. And yes, you can get spray paint from your local hobby stores, but they come in those little teeny weeny micro cans, you know. And I mean, how are you supposed to paint a body, you know, anywhere, or you know, anywhere near decent with that small of a can? Like this little plastic gas tank or gas drum or whatever, fuel tank drum, 55-gallon drum, is a you know, probably a little bit bigger than what your spray paint that you would get from your local hobby store is, and that doesn't go too far, you know, when it comes to painting. Even cans like this, which is like a 2/3 can or a 3/4 can, this really doesn't go as far as you would think, you know, not to my liking. I usually like buying the full-size cans when I'm messing around with this stuff. Just because you'll end up using the whole can probably. You know, if you want to put down a good paint job, you're probably going to end up using the whole can, like for your primary color and for your clear coat. So once again, FYI, why I use Duplicolor. Good paint, very flexible, lasts a long time, easy to use, dries fast. You can put down one coat and spray down another coat 15 minutes later. So once again, Duplicolor, my primary choice. I don't like buying paint from my local hobby store just because of the micro size cans. And in all honesty, I think the Duplicolor puts down a better paint. It lasts longer. It's easier to use. It just lays down a lot nicer than what, you know, Tester's spray paint or any other kind of spray paint that you get from your local hobby store. So once again, reason behind my madness and all that good stuff. I like to have a lot of paint in a can. That way I'm not buying, you know, and plus at your hobby store, you're probably paying a lot of money for that little teeny weeny can. Nothing against your local hobby stores. But when it comes to spray paint, I support my local auto stores and just go with Duplicolor. Try to get full-size cans as much as possible. But when I have to get a can like this, I usually end up getting 2 of these, just, you know, just in case, to make sure that all my I's are dotted and all my T's are crossed. You know, I definitely would rather have 2 cans and having a half a can laying around that's half empty versus jumping back in my car and driving back up to the auto store for another one. Just a matter of convenience. So Duplicolor is my spray paint of choice. And once again, just to cover the bases, I am not being paid by anybody or sponsored by anybody. I'm doing all of this on my own with my own money and everything else. So I try to be as informative as possible because I like helping out my viewers, or I just like helping out people in general. So yeah, that's the reason behind why I'm so informative with everything. So back to the job at hand. We are going to put this this other drive shaft together. This is going to be for the right-hand side of the vehicle. The picture is for the left-hand side of the vehicle, driver's side, but it's all the same. So we'll get back to putting all this together. I assembled this drive shaft in the last video and just never finished putting this together because I was running low on video time and I wanted to go get some dinner and everything else. So here we go. We will start slapping this together, and we'll start by putting these bearings into this turnbuckle and the spacer. Once again, smaller bearing goes on the outside, then the spacer, and then the larger bearing on the inside, along with that little pin and the wheel spindle hex. The little Allen set screws I've already installed for the kingpins. Once again, just to reiterate, WL Toys actually uses longer set screws on here, which is nicer because it gives it just a little bit more bite on that hole. So you know, that's really the only only good thing that I've said about WL Toys in this video, is that they do use longer set screws for these kingpins. All right, so we'll get to it here. Here's my spacer. Got all the rest of my parts just kind of stuck to this stuck to this magnet over here. So since I can't hold the phone and do all this at the same time, I'm going to put the phone down and install these bearings real fast, and then we'll get back to it. Alright, so the inner bearing is installed, and just like on the other one, you can see that little teeny weeny gap in between the race of the bearing, or the center of the bearing, and the which isn't the race is the outer half. The center of the bearing and that plastic, you can see you might be able to see there's a small gap right there, and that is what that little spacer is for right here. So we'll install that spacer, and then we'll drop in this other bearing. Normally I would probably just put this right on the actual wheel spindle itself, just to guarantee that it's going to drop in there nicely and not try to fall in there sideways. And she is in. We're going to snag a bearing here off yonder magnet. Make sure we don't have anything stuck to it. And then pop that guy in there nice and straight, or as straight as possible. And I still have a little bit of white paint on my fingernails. Alright, so we have that assembled. Steering knuckle. And then we will go ahead and slip the drive shaft in, and then put this on over top of it. And you definitely want to put the drive shaft in first, because the edge of the cup here for the CV joint won't fit through that little pocket there. So I mean, if it's on your vehicle, you can do all this when it's bolted up just by pulling this part off, the steering knuckle off with the 2 kingpins, and everything comes out this way, which is relatively easy. But when you're assembling it like this, you have to go through here first and then put the rest of it on behind it. Alright, so that is somewhat assembled. I left the kingpin sticking out just a little bit so you can see the groove that is in the top of the kingpin. That's where your Allen set screw is going to slide into and keep this from walking around. Once again, you do not have to over tighten these set screws. You don't want to strip the thread. Those set screws are relatively small as far as total length, so like I said, there's not much surface area on the inside for them to get a hold of. So once again, don't over tighten those set screws. They only need to be in there just to hold these in place. So the kingpins are in, and it's just a matter of tightening down these 2 upper and lower set screws to keep all that held in check. So we'll do that real fast. Alright, so that is all together, and some of you guys who are really, some of the people that really pay attention in detail will notice that I did flip this around. I did have this on upside down. So I spun the spindle around, since this is on the passenger side of the vehicle, sitting like so, and your tie rod or your steering linkage is going to hook up to here on the end of this knuckle. I did have the pin in, but obviously it just slid out, so we'll put the pin back in, we'll slide the wheel hex on, we'll turn the page and get on with the assembly. And before we get on with the assembly, I know, man, I am such a talker. If this video camera was running the whole time while we were building this, you guys would probably be sick of all my stories. Just put on the metal wheel hex, which is kind of reminding me of the WL Toys. This is where my problem started with the WL Toys, because it had plastic wheel hexes on it. From day one, before I even drove the truck, I tore the truck apart as soon as I bought it, took the tires off it, and noticed that all the plastic wheel hexes were put on there like sideways. They weren't in line with the pin. Somebody at the factory had slapped them on there and tightened everything down and just ruined the wheel hexes. They were all trashed. So I went and bought Team Losi or Team Associated aluminum clamp-on wheel hexes, and that's where my problem started. I think if you had the plastic wheel hexes on there and you were out driving around with the truck, that would be the first thing that would strip out. You'd probably strip out a wheel hex, replace it with another wheel hex, and you'd probably be okay. But when I put the aluminum wheel hexes on there and the new stronger pins from Associated, because the WL pins are really, really flimsy. Like I said, I was able to cut through those with a pair of wire cutters with one hand. So they're pretty cheap. That's where my problem started. I put on the heavier duty pins, I put on, aluminum wheel hexes, and then the problems started to work their way further down the line. The next thing that broke on the WL Toys were the pins that were in the CV joints here. Because once again, thin pins. So I replaced those pins with a piece of an Allen wrench, and I had to use a pair of tin snips to cut the Allen wrench in half with 2 hands. So they were the Allen wrench was significantly stronger than the stock WL toy pins. So when I replaced those with the Allen pins, with the Allen wrench, then the problem progressed further down the line, which was I broke the out drive coming off the differential. I split one of those out drives from the WL Toys. I split that in half, and on the other, that was on the driver's side, and on the passenger side, I broke the axle where it goes into the CV joint. So my Allen wrench held up, but the cheap WL Toy material with the axle shafts, that snapped instead. And like I said, the problems as I started upgrading to heavier duty parts started to progress further down the line. The problems just kept finding more weak points or whatever further down the line. So I mean, ultimately putting the wheel hexes on there, the aluminum wheel hexes on it, is probably what made the WL Toys start to fall apart, basically, or essentially. I mean, if you're going to go heavy duty, with RC cars, even with real cars, I mean, when you're building an engine on a real car, you can't just put like one performance item on there. You have to match everything else to it. Like you can't put in good pistons without putting in a good cam, or without putting in good lifters and rockers and all that other good stuff. So it's kind of the same thing with the RC car world too. Once you start upgrading to heavier duty parts, then you pretty much have to put heavy duty stuff on the whole thing, or else it's just gonna fall apart on you, because the problems just progress further down the line until they find a weak spot, and the next weak spot is the next spot to break. So just FYI, keep in mind, as soon as you start upgrading a WL Toys, you pretty much have to go full out. You could upgrade all this, upgrade the differential to like a Vatera differential, and then what's going to happen now? You're going to start breaking drive shafts on it, or you're going to start breaking the pins on the drive shaft. So you replace the pins. That's probably going to be the first thing that goes. After you replace the pins, you're probably going to snap a drive shaft or a rear axle or something else. So once you go heavy duty, you pretty much have to do the whole thing heavy duty, or else, you know, you're going to be SOL, as they say, and we all know what that means. So, all right, that being said, we're going to turn the page. I'm at 20 minutes already, unfortunately, so I'm probably going to have to stop this video after we turn the page and restart another one, since YouTube will not let me load up a video more than 23 minutes long. All right, we got the page turned, and we are looking at this, which is the toe in and the toe out on the wheel here. Actually, it's camber caster. So we're going to start working on that. And yep, I am right, camber link. We'll start assembling this in the next video coming up here shortly. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to load up another one here in just a minute. Sorry for all the talking, but like I said, trying to give you guys an in-depth explanation, you know, between the Vatera twin hammers and WL toys. And so we'll get to doing these tie rods, or these camber links, and start assembling this whole nonsense. I mean, ultimately, it would be a lot better, like I said, with the Vatera instructions, if they just let you put all this stuff onto the car first and then put this stuff on. It would be a lot easier in the long run, versus having this full assembly just sitting off to the side. Like I said, it would have been a lot easier if they would have had you assemble this onto the bathtub chassis and then put this stuff on. But you gotta deal with what you gotta deal with. So we'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Old viewers, thanks for watching. New viewers, very much appreciated. All your comments and everything else are very much appreciated. I love reading everybody's comments. So I'll get another video out here, and once again, thank you very much for everybody who's watching, and we'll see you here in a minute.